Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and today we're going to do something a little bit different. I have a pistol in front of me, but I also have a nice arrangement of old paperwork here. And specifically what we have is like the complete paperwork history of the Mauser 1910 pistol, courtesy of Mauro Baudino at the Paul Mauser Archive. What makes this really cool is that this is really the only complete set of German documentation like this. Most of the German companies are long gone. DWM is long gone. Ludwig Löwe is long gone. Only the Mauser archives really survived through 2 world wars. And only in the case of the 1910 Mauser pistol here do we have the complete history of the gun from its very first drawings through its actual production. So what I thought we would do is go through and look at each element of this documentation so that you can get an idea for what was the process for bringing a new gun to market in Germany in 1910. So let's get right into it. First, to give you some context, here's the pistol that we're talking about today. This is a Mauser model of 1910. It is in 25 ACP, or 6.35 millimeter Browning. And this pistol was one of what was intended to be a whole family of pistols, all of the same basic shape and function, but scaled up and down. So the first one was the model 1909 in 9mm. That one was technically problematic and was a commercial failure. However, they then scaled it down to 25 ACP for the 1910 and 32 ACP for the 1914. So that was the original intention. Our first documents here are a set of drawings. This is Paul Mauser's handwritten signature, which we'll find on a bunch of these. And you can see that these are dated 1905. And this was right after Joseph Nickel arrived to work at Mauser. And Nickel would be one of the primary engineers behind this design. So we have a couple different drawings of some of the fire control parts here, the striker trigger and the linkage in between them. So this is the first step in making a gun. You have to actually design it, and you do that first on paper. Next up, we have a pair of documents relating to the, officialdom, the German military and government becoming aware of this pistol. So what we have here is a letter that was written from the Deutsche Versuchsanstalt für Handfeuerwaffen. This was an agency that was tasked with evaluating handguns for the German government. And in 1908, they have been informed by somebody that Mauser is making a 7.65 millimeter pistol. And they're interested and they would like to get one for evaluation. We then have a very thin response here from the Mauser company. This is signed by one of the chief officers at Mauser, and Paul Mauser's signature is almost faded away from it. But it's a reply saying that, yes, basically we are making one, but it's not ready yet. And by the way, our 9mm version is going to be lighter than the Browning pistol. So this gives us a little bit of insight into the motivation behind the Mauser family. They were attempting to compete with the Browning semi-automatic pistols, the 1900s and 1903s, which were extremely popular and successful at the time. So you've got a design, you've got clients. The next thing is to actually build a prototype. And in order to build a prototype, you need to have blueprints. So this is a complete book of blueprints for the Mauser 1910. In particular, this also includes, at the very beginning, a listing of each component part. There were 31, and really cool, it lists the location where each part is going to be made. There were 3 separate, basically separate buildings in the Mauser complex at the time, and it lists the Meister, or the man who's in charge of production of each of those parts. So there are some cool names in there. We'll get to that a little more in a moment once we move forward through there. This is going to have the design for the complete gun, which I believe is this next page. So there's the complete gun, several different views of it. There you have it locked open. There's a cool one. Really impressive drafting here. You wonder how people did this sort of thing before CAD/CAM. It's by having very talented draftsmen and engineers. So this is every component part fully dimensioned, and that is what you need in order to actually build a pistol. Once you've got that prototype made, then you need to do some more documentation on it. Mauser was one of the first companies to really pioneer working with glass plate photography. So what they would do is they would take glass plate photographs of a number of different images. They would take a picture of the complete gun. They would then take some pictures of the gun field stripped. So this one is the slide assembly. We have the barrel, the extractor, the slide, the firing pin, spring, all of those components, the buffer. And then they would also take a series of pictures showing the process of using the gun and disassembling the gun. So in this particular case, we have an employee here holding the slide back. What's interesting about this is they actually used basically children to do a lot of this modeling. An apprentice at the Mauser factory at this time would start at about the age of 14 or maybe 15, and they used these young kids as photography models because they had small hands, and in particular for a small gun like the 1910, you know, my full-size adult hands they hide a lot of the gun, where this guy's do not. So these pictures would be used both for reference and also for creating a manual. Also of nice historical relevance, each of these pictures, let's see if I can get that, can't really get it to show very well. Each of these plates, there we go, is numbered and dated, which in some cases, like this one, gives us a good idea of the time frame that was involved. So this particular one is November 4th, 1909, so that we know that by November they had a prototype of the pistol finished and available for photography. So once you have all of the glass plate photographs, then, well, the first thing you have to do is train your factory workers how to assemble the thing. So you mimeograph a preliminary internal manual, which is going to be basically the same content as your final printed manual, but for all the pictures, you take those glass plates and make positive images out of the negative plates, and then just cut them out and glue them into the manual. So this is an original internal factory manual showing the assembly and disassembly of the 1910. Now comes the hard part. You have to figure out how this is actually going to sell. So what we have here is calculations for the self-loading pistol model 1910 caliber 35, 6.35 millimeter, made in 1911, or this document is from 1911. This is costing. So how do we know what to sell the gun for? Well, the way we do that is by looking at what it costs to produce. So here is a listing of every part in the gun. Also, again, the Waffenmeister in charge of production for each part, and then we have a labor component here, a materials component here, and a total cost. They go through and do this for every single part in the gun. And interestingly, the labor cost, of course, is based on the worker's salary, whoever's involved in doing these. And you'll notice a few particularly interesting names in the list of the Waffenmeisters. So if I go over to here, we have Federley. The Federley brothers were instrumental in Mauser at developing a lot of the products, including in particular the C96. We have Seidel. This is not Alex Seidel, who would be instrumental in the foundation of H&K and the development of the HSC pistol. That is actually Alex Seidel's father, who also worked for the Mauser company. Scrolling up a little bit, we have Nickel. So Joseph Nickel was in charge of, looks like, the sights, or part of the sight assembly. All of the really substantial, significant people in Mauser would be working on various guns like this, and so you'll see their names appear in the documentation. once you have the costing in place and you know what this pistol is going to take to build and what the profit margin is going to potentially be, then you actually have to get permission to build it. So this is a report from one of the meetings of the Mauser Board of Directors. This meeting took place March 3rd, 1910, but it was based on the 1909 calendar year. And so this is minutes of their meeting, what they were talking about. And one of the things that they mention here, by the way, if you're an archivist, don't highlight historic documents. This was a previous curator, if that's not too much to say for him. One of the things that they were looking at here was how some of their military patents were going to be expiring fairly soon, and they needed to expand more into the civilian market, or they anticipated that they needed to expand into the civilian market to make up for anticipated reduction in profits on the military side. So in the end, of course, they went ahead and approved the gun for production. And that leads us to the last major step, which is possibly one of, well, they're all important, but one that you can't overlook, which is marketing and publicity. So a couple of the things we have here include, this is a note from Paul Mauser back to a magazine editor who was writing an article about the 1910. They sent the article to Mauser. Mauser made a few corrections and then returned it to them. So that's one way to get your name out there. This one is a letter that Mauser wrote to General von Schoneich in the Austrian military in Vienna, talking about a rifle contract, but also saying that, by the way, I'm sending you an engraved model of 1910 6.35 millimeter pistol as a presentation gun. And of course, sending cool gifts to people in positions to make decisions on procurement is another great way to get your guns acquired by militaries. And then, of course, you saw the in-house pre-manual. You then also, of course, build that into a complete manual. So these images are the exact same glass plate photographs that were taken that we saw earlier in the process. I think that's the one that we actually saw. So we have an original English language manual here, as well as an Italian language one, because if you're a company like Mauser, you want to be marketing this all over the world. So once you have all of this taken care of, then pistols actually start coming out the door and you can start selling them. Hopefully that has given you guys an interesting new perspective into what's involved in actually producing a pistol from sort of the administrative side and what has to happen, what different elements. I get a lot of questions from people asking about things like blueprints for old firearms, and it's very, very rare to find a complete book set of blueprints from a gun like we have here through the Paul Mauser Archive. You will occasionally find individual sheets, but having this whole thing together as a complete book is pretty rare. So unfortunately, this sort of thing is very difficult to find. But you put it in combination with all the rest of what we have here, and it makes, I think, for a fascinating picture. So a big thanks to the Paul Mauser Archive for providing this documentation for us to take a look at, to show to you guys. They have been working on these documents for like 10 years now. There was a book that they published about Paul Mauser and some of the lesser known aspects of the Mauser business. I have a book review on that book that you can take a look at if you're interested and purchase a copy of the book. And then they digitize a lot of these records. Some of them get published online. And of course, they are always open to correspondence from researchers and collectors looking for detailed information from the Mauser Archives. So if that sounds interesting to you, I have a link to the Mauser Archives website in the description text below. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.